Oh, look at that. We are live. Good morning, everybody. This is James Clendenin, Council Member for District 3 here in Wichita, Kansas. Just wanted to welcome everybody to our District 3 virtual breakfast. We are live. Good morning, everybody. This is James Clendenin, Council Member. And I'll turn that down. We're happy to see everybody here today. Please, I hope you join us live on Facebook or on Zoom. I believe you can get, if you get our newsletter, you can get a link to the Zoom call so you can be on live with us. Or if you have any questions or anything you'd like to say, you can also add that on our Facebook. We may not get to it live, but we will get those answered as we can, preferably later on today or throughout the day. But thank you all for being here. We have a kind of a special guest, I feel like. Kaylin is here today with MABCD. She, through everything that's been going on, the pandemic, COVID, I'm sure has not had any time off. It is MABCD never sleeps and code enforcement issues never go away, it seems. And so she's here to give us an update today from MABCD and about what's happening in the city of Wichita concerning code enforcement. Kaylin, take it away.
Thank you, sir. Well, as James said, I'm Kaylin Nethercott. I'm the Neighborhood Inspection Administrator within MABCD. And I do oversee the code enforcement efforts for several areas. Just to review, just in case somebody doesn't know the scope of what we do, we deal with housing complaints, residential bulky waste, nuisance complaints that would include junk and debris, tree waste, inoperable vehicles on private property. We also manage the illegal dumping program. We manage the tall grass and weeds program, and we do work some with residential zoning cases. For example, if people are running an illegal business out of their home, or they want to put up a shed over a utility area, those kinds of things. So we have stayed really, really busy. Under normal circumstances, our staff would consist of 15 inspectors that are assigned to geographic areas throughout the city, 4 office staff, a code enforcement liaison, and then normally we would add in tall grass and weeds staff for the seasonal work that we do in that program. So a couple of things, just impacts of COVID, and then I'll talk just a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of the volume of code enforcement needs. When the first shutdown happened back in the first part of March, we had luckily had a technology upgrade that allowed us to essentially leave our inspectors in the field and close our offices. That took a little bit of effort to do, but we were able to keep going, just like it wouldn't have looked any different from the outside looking in, other than the way that we had structured it in a way that our employees would be working in a safe and appropriately distanced environment. So the other impact that we saw during that time was that court was suspended for a period of time. And so when we approach some of our cases, we know that they could in fact end up in court. So there was a period of time where court was suspended while those details were worked out of what that might look like. So we were not kind of business as usual during that time frame, but we were very, very busy. So a couple of things that we've seen. Our illegal dumping program, the volume in that this year has absolutely been off the charts. When that program originated, we were thinking at that time, it was before I started, I've been here a couple of years, that we would have about 10 to 15 pickups a week, that would be our volume of illegal dumping. We had as many as 75 in 1 week during the pandemic. And that average has remained consistently well above what we would have thought. Now, there's probably a couple of drivers of that. Because of COVID, the neighborhood cleanups that would typically be held in the spring, they did not happen. And my understanding is that some of those are going to happen this fall. So hopefully that will alleviate some of that volume in illegal dumping. One of the other impacts we have seen is specifically in tall grass and weeds. We were not able to hire our seasonal staff this year. There was a hiring freeze that went in place along with the shutdown. And so we've asked our regular inspectors to take care of those inspections for us. So given that our overall volume was up about 40% after the first 2 quarters of 2020, and that our inspectors have taken on tall grass and weeds cases, which we'll handle about anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 cases on tall grass and weeds a year. We have been very busy. As James mentioned, we haven't really taken time off or been gone. And that's just a function of the time that everything hit was seasonal for us, and we were going to be very busy anyway. So I would say, if I'd be happy, I want to talk a little bit about the Code Enforcement Liaison Program and some other things, but I'd welcome questions now, if it's appropriate, for anything about, like I said, nuisance complaints, housing complaints, how do you submit a complaint, those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody right now online, and I don't know who's joining us online right now, and honestly, Kevin, we may even have people jump in later on.
Sure.
And we may submit questions from questions that we get online. But is there anybody watching on Facebook today? If you are on Facebook, say hello so we know you're there. But is there anybody on Facebook or anybody here in our Zoom audience that has any questions at all? And if you do have questions and Kaylin is talking, please feel free to put your messages in the chat. It looks like we have 3 here. But no questions yet, so very good. So if you have any questions and you don't want to say them out loud, you can type them in the chat here. And boy, conducting these meetings is a little different. So please feel free. We don't have any questions right now, Kaylin, so please feel free to continue. Okay,
so just that's a little bit about just current state. I want to talk just a little bit about process. So we deal about 7 to 1 as many nuisance cases as we do housing cases. To be back in the day, there were more housing cases than nuisance, but due to some combined departments, different things like that, that has shifted. And so when we're looking at resolving a case, just our basic process is we receive a complaint, and you have the ability to do those by phone. You can do them online. You can submit them through Maddie. So we are complaint driven. We want your complaints. That's our business, because there will be many things that go on in our community that we won't know about as problems unless you report them. And so when we receive a complaint, we send an inspector out to investigate that concern, and then we open a case. And by doing that, that allows us to manage this on an individual property basis, and to work with the property owners or the tenants, depending on the circumstance, to give them time to address the problems on their own, or to move that through our natural complaint resolution process, which can take several tracks. Now, our goal always is compliance. It is not punishment. We are not, that's not our goal, because we recognize that we've got this one property that we're dealing with the property owner on, resolving an issue that they're having, but we've got probably 5 to 7 other property owners that surround that are waiting anxiously for us to get something done. So we give an appropriate compliance period based on the scope of what needs to be done, whether it's a nuisance complaint, a housing complaint. And if the person can help themselves, then that's great. If they can't, we can refer them to a code enforcement liaison program, which is Suzanne Bays. Many of you may have talked with her before, but several years ago, we implemented a code enforcement liaison program and funded it so that there are a limited number of materials and equipment available to link up with volunteers. I think there's several of them online with us today, who may be able to help those property owners who are either physically or fiscally unable to do the work themselves. Now, again, that is a referral program, and we run it in that way because the goal of it is to really alleviate sending people to court when it's not going to do any good. You know, there are cases where the court process is just absolutely not going to be the solution. It isn't going to solve the problem. It's not going to get the property into compliance. And Deb Legg, who was the person in this position before me, was very wise to recognize that that code enforcement liaison program could supplement an area where we didn't have any other tools to work with. So court has resumed. So as of May 28th, court had resumed. So we're back kind of in a natural process. We've got our code enforcement liaison program going again, because there was a period of time during the pandemic where volunteers were not eager to be out and about. And we weren't eager to have them do that because we weren't certain of the safety of those environment in those situations. Now, I'm gonna kind of supplement that by saying, thanks to Mr. Clendenin, the District 3 pilot project that ran not last year, but the year before, was very successful and taught us some valuable lessons that we have carried forward, not only in that code enforcement liaison program, but in other areas. And so for those of you who probably know more about this than I do, actually, the pilot project allowed us to pick a targeted area within District 3 where we practiced proactive enforcement for about a year. Inspectors were reassigned and they were put into those areas. And it was more of a proactive, get ahead of it type of approach and an educational approach for people that might have code violations that they may not have even known that were code violations. So that worked very well. So the lessons we took out of that were, we are working to, number one, we're working to duplicate that code enforcement liaison position. Right now we have one person who's doing that. And we recognize that there's plenty of need for us to have two on our staff. So we've realigned an inspector's position to make that a second code enforcement liaison position. Now, again, we're working through the nuances of the hiring freeze and what that may look like. So the future of that, it's coming, but it's not quite in place yet. A couple of other things that we learned is that if we put a little bit more money into materials and equipment to be used citywide, we get a lot more bang for the buck. And so the council last year during the budget for 2020 did in fact give us a little bit more funding to work with in that regard. Now, again, we haven't been able to launch that to the fullest extent in 2020 because of the pandemic, but we're getting there. I mean, that I think has great potential and it will work well. Now, the third thing that we took away from that pilot project experience and just what we learned there was a private process server. In other words, if we write somebody a uniform criminal complaint to get them to come to court, it is very, very effective to have a private process server serve those documents for environmental court docket items. And so as of March 1, we brought on a contracted process server. So all of the UCCs that we write in neighborhood inspection are now served by that company. That's been effective. Now, obviously, again, we've had to work around the fact that we implemented that just as court shut down. And so what we did was we glutted that. We built a bubble in court that we're still working through. But we are working through it. And it is working, I think, in a way that is a model we can use going forward. So that's kind of a long-winded way to say, we're working on two parts of our process to get people more help and then to shorten the length of time that it takes to get them through a process to wherever its natural conclusion is going to be, so that we do not want there to be a perception that that there's nothing happening. There may be a lot going on behind the scenes on a property. It just takes time to work through those different parts of our process. So like I said, those are good lessons that we've implemented. Like I said, not as successfully as we would have liked just because of the darned Rona. We're ready for that to be over.
Well, Kaylin, I appreciate you mentioning the pilot project. That was something that was that came out of the sale of the hotel. And one of those things that, had been something that I've been hearing about, and I still hear about 9 years later. It's something that's going to continue to be an issue. And I was very happy to see that a second liaison was going to be added. Like you said, this darn coronavirus has really set people back. We're starting to get people wondering, hey, I turned this in several times. Why is nothing happening? And so I know you'll start to see more of those as Maddie and I start to see more of those as well. I want to interrupt because we have at least one question that popped up. If you want to take one.
Absolutely. And
Right.
I can actually see that. I'm on the chat. I'm on chat, so I can see those.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I can't see the Facebook ones, but I can see the chat one. And so the question I'm seeing is, how will the budget cuts impact inspections and follow-up inspections? Is there a place for citizens or neighborhood associations to assist with the inspection, re-inspection process? So as of right now, we have not had staffing cuts in neighborhood inspection. As with other departments, we've been asked to trim some monies, but that has not impacted us in terms of staffing yet. And I hope that it won't, but we've got a kind of some retirements coming up and different things. We think we'll be able to manage that without having to actually cut staff. Now, the second part of that is there a place for citizens or neighborhood associations to assist with the re-inspection or inspection process? And the answer to that is we would rather see those resources work as volunteers with our code enforcement liaison program. Because when we start cases and we're documenting inspection results or re-inspection results, we have to do that in a way that we assume that it could end up in court. And so we don't want to involve them in that piece of the process because we don't want them to have to be in court to testify against a neighbor, for example. So there's not really a way to do that. But there would be, like I said, we'd much prefer to see that time and effort put into the volunteer program that our code enforcement liaison runs. And then I got another question for Ms. Maddie, that how has the liaisons program been expanded and how far into the future is it funded? It is funded through this year for sure. In terms of, now let me back up. The position of the code enforcement liaison is secure. I mean, it isn't grant funded. It's not a temporary position, nothing like that. Her success and the success of that type of program will be on the supplemental funding that we receive. Do we have money for materials and equipment? Do we have money for that private process server? Do we have money to pay for dumpsters? Those kinds of things. And that money is secured through this year for the areas outside of the pilot project. Now, the pilot project is funded until basically it runs out of money. And that is a kind of a spend it down sort of methodology on that part of the world, on that geographic area. Whereas the rest of the city is on a fiscal year of January 1 to December 31st. So does that kind of answer that question, I hope?
I would say absolutely. It sounded like you did.
Okay.
Perfect. Looks like we have another question.
Can monies be made available for tree removal? Currently, only District 1 has a grant for this. That's an interesting question. Trees for us, for neighborhood inspection, we only are going to, in the tree world, in the forestry world, we're going to deal with dead and dying or diseased trees that are not on city property. So essentially, we're going to deal with the ones that are nuisance cases, and we handle those through our abatement process, which then again can get assessed back against properties. So I'm not sure. Like I said, we're only involved in the tree process when, again, it could potentially be a hazard or a nuisance case. So
Yeah.
in terms,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kayla, and I'll also say that the grant money, as far as the grant money goes, that has already been allocated by the council for and by a vote, and so that money that is being used for the grant cannot be used for tree removal. Just on that side of it, on the funding side.
thank you. Like I said, trees is a very small part of what we do. If they're standing, now we deal with a ton of tree waste, a lot of branches, limbs, dead, that kind of thing. But we're not heavily involved in the rest of it.
Any other questions right now? If no more questions, please continue, Kaylin.
Okay. Just a couple of other changes for those of you who might have come to the Reagan building, which is where we're administratively housed. Our offices have remained closed to the public, and so neighborhood inspection is open by appointment only. And we did that because most of what we do is out in the field. We need to go to people, we need to look at the properties. There's really not a reason for anyone to come to our offices in person. Now, we certainly can accommodate that, but we have not installed the kind of equipment that we need to be able to serve the public on a walk-in basis. So that is one question. That's just one thing I want to make you aware of. That was a change that we expect will be permanent, just to simply leave us closed, because it was one less office area that we had to try to accommodate. Really, when we don't, walk-in business is not our business. On the first floor of the Ronald Reagan building is where our permanent licensing area is, just on a broader scope, as well as additional administrative offices. That area has been modified to accept walk-in customers, but they have streamlined that process very, very much so that you can go online and make appointments for permitting and to ask questions and all sorts of things. So again, not that we don't welcome people, we want that interaction, but we're just shifting a little bit how we do it, so that it doesn't put a tremendous amount of people in waiting areas, for example, or having to stand around and check in and that kind of thing. So I think that we've done some good accommodations in our area. Now, again, we're a joint city-county department. For those of you who don't know, MABCD is a joint city-county area. Neighborhood inspection, which is the part that I oversee, is 100% city. Our scope of work is done inside the city limits, but the rest of our department works countywide as well as in the city limits. And so, like I said, there's good accommodations, I think, to keep those interactions robust with the public, but we're changing a little bit on how we do that. So, well, yeah, like I said, that's kind of a good overview of just our physical surroundings. Also in our building, in the Reagan building, we have the planning department, the Wichita Planning Department is in there, Metropolitan Planning Department is in there. Department on Aging's administration is there, ComCare administration is there, and then the county appraiser's office is there. So that the rest of our building has also made some accommodations to, again, be very friendly to people, but to give them many ways to interact with us, not in person. So I think, unless there's, Maddie, if there's something, or James, if there's something else, that's really all I had. I believe I've kind of hit the high points of what you wanted, but I'm happy. Like I said, you can ask me whatever, I'll do my best.
Very good. I'm looking on Facebook right now. Even though it's delayed, I don't see any questions from our Facebook audience. And I did just answer a question. One of them was, I know of a dead tree in District 1 that I had. I went ahead and I'll just tell the answer to everybody. You can send pics of it, but don't send them to code enforcement. Please send them to Maddie or I, and we will get them to the forestry department. The forestry department is the department that handles all the trees, anything that has to do with that. Unless somebody is storing debris and brush and that sort of thing in a big pile or something like that, then that would be a code enforcement issue.
Mhm.
But if it's just a down tree or a dead tree, or something needs to be taken care of, we will get that turned into forestry, and forestry can take care of that. Now, I will tell you that forestry is they're behind,
Yep.
but
I'm hoping you
but
would mention that.
yeah, it's interesting. They plant trees, they cut trees, they trim trees, they do everything, and they've been behind ever since I've been in office, and it's really been interesting. We got them caught up one year, pumped some extra money into them, and then it's just the calls come in for sure. The other thing to realize is that forestry, kind of dovetailing off of that a little bit more, forestry handles trees that are in the city of Wichita's right of way. If it's on personal property, if it's something you want trimmed, that's something you have to handle yourself. The city of Wichita won't go and do any trimming on your own personal property. But if it is in the right of way of the city of Wichita, which means if it's between a sidewalk and the street, that would be the city of Wichita's responsibility. Let us know. We'd be happy to take care of it. I do see.
Can I dovetail on that just
Yeah,
a bit?
please do. Please do.
So one of the things that we get is, and I'll just give you a generic scenario. My neighbor has a tree and it's growing over my fence and over my shed, and I'm afraid it's going to fall and it's going to damage my property.
Sure.
Okay. So at that point, we have very limited options to address that situation at all. And I'll just break it down for you. So it's a shared tree. It's alive. It's not damaged or dying. We're going to make the assumption that it's healthy. And so that becomes a civil issue between the two property owners to work out.
That's right.
We just aren't, we can't go to the point where we're going to say, well, that tree may die in the future and it may split and it may fall on two, you know what I mean? We just can't predict in that methodology how to do that. So we try to just gently say, that's something that you're going to have to work out with your neighbors.
Yeah.
And then,
oh, go ahead. I apologize.
Oh, I wanted to say just a word about inoperable vehicles. When we're done with something you said made me remember this. So when we're done with trees, I want to just say something about that.
Oh, please do. Go ahead.
So when we're talking about inoperable vehicles, because James mentioned, between the sidewalk and the street is city. So we will frequently get complaints about an inoperable vehicle in the street. And people will go to our portal and say, I didn't see a place to submit this. I don't know where to put this complaint in, but there's a vehicle on blocks and on my block, on jacks on my block, or it's been wrecked or whatever. There's a reason why on our portal, you can't find a place to put an inoperable vehicle in the street. If it's in the street, that becomes a police matter. We do not have jurisdiction on those. We deal with inoperable vehicles that are illegally parked or inoperable on private property. And then when we get those concerns about vehicles in the street, we just turn right around and send those to the community police officer for the area and let them handle that through their process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's just an education point, because we have an option on our portal for complaints about inoperable vehicles. It doesn't really say as long as they're on private property. So we'll help get those to the right place if they're submitted, but you can streamline that a great deal just to submit it to the police.
Very good.
So,
thanks.
yeah.
Good info. Very good info. Anybody else have any questions for Kaylin? I keep losing my feed. I must have horrible internet. I don't see anything more right now on Facebook.
James.
Yes.
I would like to ask, if I have a situation in the neighborhood that, well, it's high grass and weeds and at a home where there's a for sale sign, is it appropriate for me to go to the real estate company and ask them to take care of it?
I would say it would be, since they have the actual listing, I think it is appropriate for you to ask them if they could find out how it can get taken care of. Obviously, they're not the one responsible to get it taken care of, but they can contact their client. And honestly, if it's a real estate company that's interested in selling the house,
Yeah.
they will definitely contact their client and say, hey, we need to get that cut down. We're not going to sell it if it's high. And so I think that would be very appropriate to call the real
Okay.
estate company,
All right.
and ask them to contact their client. It actually might be a very expedited way to do it instead of going through the city.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And-
but if you can't, you can always turn into the city on tall grass and weeds. Kaylin, I don't know how we are doing this year, but normally we have 500-600 cases pending, and it's just so tough to get to all the cases. How is it looking this year in tall grass and weeds?
You know what? I'm glad you asked. I want a couple things about that. We have private contractors that we work with to handle tall grass and weeds. That's not something we have the in-house ability to do. We added an extra contractor this year, so we actually have 4. Last
Very
year,
good.
we tried to run it with 3 and we floundered. And of course, last year, we thought we were going to have to build an ark before the end of the summer because there was so much rain. So we started off behind, we stayed behind because we couldn't get it dry enough to get things mowed. So I think a combination of things. We've got our in-house inspectors, our regular inspectors that are handling the inspections. We have an increased contracted staff available. My sense is that we're not quite as behind as we have been in years past. The second thing is I want to just say a word about tall grass and weeds. So one of the questions we've had in prior district meetings was, if you've got properties that are just chronic, every year, you're going to have to mow them, can you just go mow them? And the answer is we have to start every tall grass and weed season with a clean slate. There's a blanket publication that's put in the Wichita Eagle early in the spring. Then a non-compliant property receives one specific notice. So the first time that we abate a tall grass and weeds problem takes the longest. Okay. Then after that, once we receive a subsequent complaint, oh, it's grown up again, we don't have to go back and re-notify. We can move it straight to abatement status again. But now there's a fine point of distinction there. We're not going to do that automatically. Just because we've mowed it once doesn't mean that we're going to go back and mow it again, because sometimes that one mow and the bill that people get for that is enough to get their attention, and then they will take care of it after that, which is what we hope.
Sure.
So if you have the chronic properties that are going to grow up, they've been vacant, and we know they're out there, keep calling us, keep letting us know so we can get them back into an abatement procedure before they become 4 feet tall. So don't assume that we're going to just automatically do it, because that's not the way the system's set up to work.
Absolutely. And I would also remind people that, a house is for sale, like in Elena's case, or a house that's abandoned and nobody really is there. If you see it getting close to that 12-inch mark, go ahead and get it called in.
By the time we get to it, it'll be time to mow it.
Or more, right?
Yeah, or more.
Or more. And so now we definitely want to make sure that there's no one living at home before you just go and turn someone in. I mean, the whole point here was education, especially during the pilot project. And so we want to make sure that if there's somebody at a home that the grass is tall and somebody's there and they can't mow it, let us know that, because we will find someone to try to get that thing mowed, and see if we can help somebody before we really start enforcement on them. We may still send somebody out from MABCD, but they'll find out kind of what the situation is, hopefully, and so we can take appropriate action. We want to keep people out of court, and so that court liaison really is important for us to get those cases too, because we have lots of people. And again, the city of Wichita has its own equipment that can be checked out by groups of people to help that get done. So anyway, just a great reminder. See some activity on the chat, Maddie. Very good. A couple of links that have been posted. Maddie and Kaylin, you want to jump in and let us know what you posted there?
I think Maddie did a better job than I did. It's the link to the portal where you can go online to submit concerns. You can do that anonymously. You can do it with your contact information if you want follow-up. That just depends on your circumstance. You know, if you want to preserve neighborhood relations, you can do it anonymously and nobody will ever know. Now, let me say this. If you do submit it with your contact information, we are not going to share that. So that is a protected source for us, because people go, well, I know who complained and I think it's this. No. You may not actually at all. And we're not going to tell you, because the source of the complaint doesn't matter. It doesn't make it any less valid.
Right.
So that's, like I said, please report that in whatever way is most comfortable to you.
And I promise half the time you think you know who it is and you don't actually know.
Yeah, it's probably not who you think it would be.
Yeah. A lot of those people who you think it might be don't want to turn it in because they think you'll think it'll be them. So it's very interesting.
And people
Anyway.
are also always welcome to email or call me too with issues. I am happy to be the middleman with getting that message to my BCD.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions? Good conversation this morning so far.
I think we got a question in the chat box, James.
From, let me see. Oh, very good. Is there a way to have the city keep up with the chronic tall grass properties that they own? Good question. The last 3 or 4 years, the five or six fields at 2100 South George Washington Boulevard get very tall, well over 12 inches between mowing. Yeah, actually, there may or may not be. Sometimes some of those properties do get lost in the system because maybe they're small or they're not official parcels that are on the mow list. Sometimes the city of Wichita has so many properties, but at the same time, especially if it's very rainy, especially with budget conditions that may fluctuate, they could have those some of those properties on a 21 to 28 day mow cycle, which makes it very difficult. Obviously, that has to do not just with the budget, but also with the amount of contractors that we have to be able to mow those areas. Now, that being said, because we had such a problem with this about 3 or 4 years ago, the city manager and I had a conversation, and we did buy some equipment at the city of Wichita for some public works people to go out and do that mowing if it was one of those areas that just wasn't being taken care of by the contractor. So if you have those specific parcels ever, please turn them into Maddie or I, and we will have them go out and mow them. Definitely, the city of Wichita wants to be a good neighbor too. Sometimes we have the same issues as everybody else. That's why I'm always wanting to be not extremely lenient, but at least educational to people and let them know that they have an issue and let it get taken care of, because we would love the same courtesy to get that taken care of. I think it's just about us all working together to keep our city clean and nice and being neighborly at the same time. So we have another one, I believe. Richard Ruth, how do you ensure you are getting the lowest prices possible on those contractor jobs as the city negotiates? Seems like some are pretty high. Yes, actually, we go through an RFP process, and they all have to submit bids for doing the work. And normally it is the least expensive bids that are taken. A lot of times, though, the least expensive isn't the best. And some of the contractors, unfortunately, we've had to let go because they just can't keep up or are not doing a good enough job. And so it's all about being able to do the job as well. But we do have an RFP process, and we do try to make sure that we're getting the best value. out of our contractors. But that was privatized. Gosh, I think that was privatized about 10 years ago, maybe.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
it was privatized, and it saved us about, I think, $1 million a year on mowing, not having City of Wichita workers do that. And so that was a good thing. I mean, it saved us money, but at the same time, we're more dependent on contractors, and quality control sometimes can be a little bit more of an issue. And so we just have to stay on top of that with citizen engagement, and that can help us do that. But we saved quite a bit of money when we went to the private model of having local contractors do that, and it employs people out in the community as well. So, it looks like we might have another question. Oh no, just a thumbs up. Thank Richard. I appreciate it. Okay. Anything else? Diana, I love your dog, by the way. My dog wants it up at my lap too. Yeah.
She loves Zoom. Sorry.
Well,
That's a
Zoom loves her.
girl.
Zoom
That's a
loves her.
I do want to have Kaylin touch base on. I think she's probably already kind of a bit, but a question I get from a lot of people when they turn something in is it looks like the city's not doing anything.
Yeah.
This neighbor has these issues. Why aren't you doing anything? So Kaylin, could you kind of talk about when we get complaints, the
Mhm.
process sometimes, how, we seek voluntary compliance, what it means if
We
we have
do.
to take someone to court, and just how to feel that when it feels like we're not doing anything.
Great question.
Yep, that is a good question. So when we receive a complaint, no matter what the source, we are going to triage that according to protocols that have been in place for several years. Tom Stoltz was the director prior to Chris Labrum, and he sat down with my predecessor, Deb Legg, and said, okay, so these are in terms of emergency to non-emergency. This is kind of the case types we deal with. And so this is how long it's going to take. It should take on a voluntary compliance period. So we notify via certified mail that there is a notice of violation, and then that triggers the compliance period that can be anywhere from really 7 to 60 days, depending on what it is. Okay, so and again, we want to give those homeowners time, or I shouldn't always say homeowners, sometimes it's tenants. We want to give those people time to solve that problem on their own. Now, the other thing that can happen, it doesn't happen as frequently as it did because it had gotten a little bit excessive, but inspectors have the ability, if the people that they're working with on those properties are communicating with them and they're trying. I mean, you can see that there's honest effort. They've done some improvements. They just don't quite have it done. We have the ability to give them an extension, to give them more time. And so we're going to be pretty generous. We're not as they seemed. So let's say that they don't. Okay, so that happens. They don't for whatever reason, and we have to issue a ticket or a UCC. So we write that ticket. It goes to the court systems to have a case number assigned. Then it goes to a process server to be served. It's then served with a court date. Right now, we are scheduling for court dates in November. So the process gets protracted if we do not get that voluntary compliance right off the bat, or at least effort. So then it gets to court. There's a first appearance. There's an extension from that usually, unless it's in compliance at the time it hits court. Then there can be arraignments. Then the judge has the option to work with prosecutors to give additional time. And at some point in here, if it's a situation we can, if it's a situation where we can involve a code enforcement liaison, we will in there. But again, even that effort takes time to pull together materials and volunteers and have it scheduled and get it taken care of. So it is a long process. That's why I think sometimes the perception is that nothing's happening when it's there's a lot happening behind the scenes to get that to a point where voluntary compliance is an option, or we administratively abate nuisances, or the court system kicks in some way. Just a quick note, I see Richard's question, 60 days is too long for tall grass and weeds. That isn't a case that receives that length of a compliance period. So just to get that out there. But that I think is why it can seem like nothing's happening. And in the cases where voluntary compliance isn't easily achievable early on, it's going to take a while. I mean, it just is.
Yeah. Well, also we have state laws that are govern a lot of what we do in cases of abatement as well. And so, it's always a fine balance of really protecting people's property rights, but at the same time protecting the rights of the property owners, next to them. And so we try to get it done as quick as possible, but when you're going through the court system, especially, that can really slow things up for sure.
Does that help, Maddie?
Yes, that helps for sure.
And to answer Richard's question about out of state, well, not really a question, but a statement about out of state landlords. Yes, out of state landlords absolutely can be a hindrance to getting something done. Case in point, the Batten Apartments, which we've battled for years. For years and years.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. At one point, I was working with the sheriff's department and the police department to try to get someone served papers down in Oklahoma because of a property. And it really, it's tough when you have an out-of-state owner. And but we work very hard on it. A lot of times that can take quite a bit of time legally. And so if there are out-of-state owners, that makes it even worse. And so, Richard, I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of those things that we battle as well. And you probably wouldn't be shocked, but you'd be shocked how many out-of-state owners we have to deal with and try to get notified that their properties, anywhere from California to Oklahoma to New York, really.
Ontario, we've got a
All
couple
over
in
the place.
Ontario. Yeah.
So, yes, Richard, Batten Apartments. So the Batten Apartments are over near Batten Street and Harry. Basically, they're apartments that are 2-story, 4-plex apartments. Actually, if someone restored them, they could be extremely nice.
There's 31 separate units.
Yeah, they're just, I tell you what, but they would be very expensive,
huge.
Obviously, to renovate. They're all brick. They're built solid. Right now, they're all stripped, or they were all stripped of a lot of their copper and everything. Kaylin, I'm sure you have horror stories.
If we can keep those secured and mowed,
I think Kaylin
we
froze
count
up.
that as wins.
There we
Literally, by people who aren't supposed to be there. Sorry. If we can keep those boarded and mowed, we feel like that's a win.
Yeah, especially with out of state. As long as if they're mowed and they're boarded up, then they're more of a visual nuisance instead of a safety nuisance. And then as long as the safety issues are taken care of, we can continue trying to get them taken care of in other ways. The other thing that we look at as well, the state does allow, if a property is deemed to be in a dilapidated or gosh, Kaylin, help me out with the term.
Dangerous and dilapidated structure.
Yes, if it's considered that, then if it's also behind on its taxes, then we don't have that full 5-year window to get that thing to a tax sale. I think it's up to 3 years behind. I think the state allows us to be able to, or the county in conjunction with us, to bring that to a tax sale. Now, just because a property is put on tax sale doesn't mean that it's going to get bought, or that it's going to get bought by somebody who has the money to pay the back taxes and or have the money to fix it up. A lot of times those houses are bought sight unseen. And when somebody else buys it, that starts a whole new window of time when it comes to abatements and getting it through the process again. So again, those state law governs that. And I would encourage any of you who are concerned about those laws or would like to see them changed, let your state legislators and senators know. We've had a bill up there a couple times now, one that was actually signed by the governor, that was passed by both bodies in the House and the Senate, and vetoed by the governor. And so a lot of politics played up in Topeka, I know, but keep hounding your legislators, and they will hopefully eventually hear you. So it looks like we have a Facebook question. I'm going to read it from Janet Thea Harris. Hi, Janet. Glad you're on with us today. Good to see you. It says, I have to work with Mr. Labram on getting ideas worked. We worked on down tree branches across sidewalks. Now we have summer month household trash bags at the street. More than a week going to a priority one. So Janet, when we have trash that's just sitting out on a curb for an extended period of time, especially probably if somebody doesn't have trash service or house is cleaned out, who do we call? Can we call you guys to get that taken care of? I know you can send something to Maddie or I, and we can get the ball rolling on that. How is that handled?
So there's a couple of things. We haven't changed any priorities on either of those items because the processes we have right now work very well for those. So when we're looking at trash on the curb, I'll address that one first. There's a couple of things that we're going to be worried about. Number one is getting the problem resolved. And number two, making sure that there's actually trash service at the facility. Now, sometimes those situations are when people move out. Sometimes it's because they haven't paid their bill. So we can handle those a couple of ways: a shortened time frame on nuisance abatement, or depending on where it's located on the property, we can handle it as illegal dumping. It depends. Like I said, there's some subtleties of that we're going to handle that on a case-by-case basis. Now, I think the one that George is referring to there was resolved in less than a week using our existing process. And we did it in a way to ensure that it wouldn't be a problem going forward. Now, as far as the trees on the sidewalk, those are, again, going to be handled in a joint effort between forestry and us. And so we have the ability to handle those as an emergency if they truly are an emergency. In the almost 2 years I've been here, that's happened once. So there's really not a need to tweak a process on that because it's such a seldom occurrence. And so we deal with those on a case-by-case basis so that we can take care of the problem as an emergency. It's not an excessive cost to property owners or anything like that. We just get it handled. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Janet. Yeah, and again, if you want to streamline the process, we can go directly to forestry. MABCD has so much that they're handling. So if there is an issue like that forestry can handle on its own, Maddie and I can go directly to forestry and have them go out and take care of the issue. But it's always appropriate to call MABCD because they will also get you to the right place. So
we will, and we will look at those. If there is a hazard, if there's a hazard, we're going to work with the appropriate parties to resolve that as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, and one other thing, we're talking about property owners, and we're talking about earlier on trees and the city of Wichita's responsibilities in trimming trees and not being able to do that on property. On private property. Another thing that we've been dealing with right now as well, and trying to work with neighbors, but also trying to stay within our bounds as the city government, is we even have some creek beds that are overgrown with branches and shrubs and trees. And in most cases, unless there is a city easement, your property will go right up to the middle of that creek bed. We have that down in the, I believe it's the Meadowlark area right now. And so if you're a property owner and you have a creek bed behind your house, check that out. You can easily find out where your property line lies on the city's GIS system. You don't have to pay anybody to do that. And see if your property line runs to the creek bed or if there is a city easement. But if it does, and the city, again, that's private property, and the city of Wichita is really not supposed to go back there unless they have written permission. And a lot of times the city of Wichita would have to go through several properties to get to somebody who's complaining about the creek bed. And so that makes it very difficult. And a lot of times, again, the city of Wichita, if we open that can and start cleaning up people's personal property, then we have to do that all over the place. And it does open up for a lot of liability if the city of Wichita does something that maybe hurts the property in some way or somebody else gets hurt. So where we really struggle with the appropriate time to clean those creek beds for someone or not. And again, if it's a hardship, a lot of people don't realize it. And if it's a hardship getting that cleaned up, then maybe we can go through our liaison and try and our forestry, our public works, our parks department, and see if we can do something to get permission to do that. But that ends up being a very sticky situation sometimes. And so again, if it's private property, the city of Wichita really shouldn't be cleaning up private property, again, unless it's a hazard or a nuisance to property owners. But in the case of creek beds, that again, it gets very sticky. So I wanted to throw that out there since we were talking a little bit about forestry, and Maddie and I had been dealing with that a little bit recently. Let's see. Janet Theo Harris online says we have two very good MABCD inspectors, Beth Ann and John. We are losing inspectors and we have to get them back to the number needed. I absolutely agree, Janet. It is a frustration during budget time every single year when we talk about getting the appropriate amount of inspectors out there. I think everybody realizes our inspectors are just working their rears off. They really are. They're from case to case to case. And then when they're not out in the field, they're out doing paperwork to follow up on cases. And it's a never ending cycle. I don't envy them in their job. Mr. Labram has changed the process on trees down to cross sidewalks, and it happened 2 times in 3 weeks. You should talk to Chris, get her done kind of guy. Kaylin,
Thanks, George. I talk with Chris a lot. And so if there's a process change that we need to implement in our department, I'm certain he'll let me know. So
yeah, you bet.
Yep.
You bet. Okay. Anybody else? It looks like we probably do. Citizens need to do this. Neighbors need to make their neighbors nice places to live. Reach out to people. I agree. Let's be neighborly to one another. If we have the ability to help someone, let's help. If everybody has the ability to inform someone of the correct way to do something in a neighborly way. And it's easier to do all those things. It's easier to talk to your neighbors about those things if you have a relationship with your neighbors. And so I would encourage everybody to get to know their neighbors. Funny, I moved recently, and when I moved into my house, the neighbor lady brought me a pie. And I've got to tell you, she's my favorite person in the whole neighborhood. She actually reached out. She's actually at McConnell Air Force Base, and she moves around every year, and so she knows what it's like to be the new neighbor. And she brought me a pie from Peace, Love, and Pie, and I think it was underneath the cap of gifts that I can receive. But it was definitely a very yummy apple pie, very yummy. We have more questions. If folks are nervous about neighbors, go to neighboringmovement.org. Absolutely. If you guys don't know about the Neighboring Movement, I'm a huge fan of theirs. Adam Barlow Thompson and his group of people at the Neighboring Movement are doing a great job. And they have a program that really is good at teaching people how to be neighborly and using neighborhood resources. And hopefully we can get that, I hope, implemented from around the city someday. So good question or good comment. Anybody else while we're online here? We are at our hour mark, so that's great. This is perfect timing. We'd like to keep this to an hour, hour and a half. Zoom meetings normally are a little bit more difficult to keep people attentive over that hour mark. But we're happy to take more questions. Just a reminder, you can continue to submit questions on Facebook at Wichita District 3, and we will continue to answer your questions on Facebook. It is always a pleasure to see everybody. I actually, the best part of my job is being able to go to meetings like this, neighborhood association meetings, breakfast district advisory board meetings. And I am really excited to see everybody here, even if online. We do have another question though, real quick, from Janet Theoharis. Janet asks, hiring freeze, how to get around that? Yeah, that's difficult to get around. So we'll talk about the budget real quick. We definitely have had to make some tough decisions. As a matter of fact, though, the budget was definitely affected by citizen input this time. People tend to get pretty upset with the city manager when he proposes things, but it's his job to propose things to the council. We also have budget retreats that are live for the public to tune into. We did this year especially to get input. And when we have to cut dramatically and without knowing we were going to need to, $11 million out of our budget just for this year alone, a budget that was already set, then there are some really quick, difficult decisions we have to make. We can't go into deficit. We can't borrow our way out of these things, or we would be in real big trouble. And adding more debt past our capacity or a benchmark that the council has actually set can put us in jeopardy with our rating agencies, and we do not want to be downgraded, because that means when we are downgraded by credit rating agencies, means it costs us a tremendous amount more as citizens to borrow that money, and then we could do less projects. So some of the pain we're feeling now short term is really holding back a lot of pain that we would feel if we weren't being careful about our debt levels. So that being said, next year, it's projected we'll have a $21 million deficit. And the next year after that, even more that we're going to have to deal with. Guys, this isn't because of mismanagement. This isn't because of really anything at all. We've leaned out since 2009. Every year we've leaned out as much as we can to save money. Matter of fact, last year was the first year we had any sort of surplus at all to be able to buy some extra equipment and some things needed, like in the forestry department. We bought a grappling tree trimmer to help us do that tree trimming faster. COVID-19, nobody could have predicted this. And so the one thing I can say, though, is that we've kept our debt levels our general obligation debt levels very low comparative to our budget. And so we're able to be able to weather the storm well. We've really kept our spending in check, which has helped us weather the storm, but still $11 million and $21 million is going to be real tough. So we're hoping that the federal government will come up with a program to help municipalities with some of that. But we're not holding our breaths. And on top of it, our base industry, airline industry, also private jets, people aren't obviously requesting those and using those as much now. And so it's made those jobs very difficult to keep right now. There's just a lot happening. Don't worry though, we're not, you would think we're in dire straits with the city of Wichita. If we make targeted budget cuts and we do it the right way, we'll be just fine. But I think you will also see out of this last budget, and I know I'm rambling, but this is important. I think you will see out of this last budget that we really are still committed to public safety. We did not cut our fire budget, our police budget, or our public works budget. Those are the things that citizens safety, especially, are the things that is our core competency to begin with, but are things that the citizens have said that's the most important to them. And so we're going to make sure that we can do that as best as we can. We do have, I think, more questions. Are we backfilling? If an inspector retires or leaves, will their position be filled during the freeze? Kaylin, can you answer that?
I can. We are, of course, going to request an exception to the hiring freeze. There's a process to do that. There is a mechanism in place to request review.
We're losing Kaylin again.
So hopefully the answer, now having said that, I will tell you that there is a delayed permission granted. We keep things running. Am I back? I'm sorry. Am I?
You're back, kind of. Well, Kaylin is coming back, which she's still frozen there. Sorry, Kaylin. I will answer. There's a comment. City manager can make recommendations, but if he tries to compromise the well-being of our pets, he should expect serious pushback. I would say not just on pets, but on any issue. If the citizens don't like it, we do expect pushback. We don't do this process lightly, and we take citizen input very seriously. That's the reason.
Can you hear me now? Can you?
Kaylin, oh, there, you're back. You're back. I'm going to finish you're also muted, Kaylin. I will finish what I was saying about the budget, and then we'll let you finish.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, don't apologize. Happened to me earlier. No, actually, that's the whole reason why we have so much citizen input during budget time. We have 3+ months, well, 3 months worth of citizen input, district advisory board meetings for the public to come to. We do virtual town halls. We talk about the budget. The budget is presented, I think, 3 times at the city council level, with a workshop, a formal presentation, and then another presentation on the day that we're expected to adopt. And so we try very hard to make sure there's tons of input. That way, when there are proposals and people don't like the proposals being made, we can make adjustments. So animal control was one of those things that we felt like there was a model that might be able to work. Citizens were not happy with that model, and so we backtracked and we decided to go a different way. It wasn't the most ideal way, but we were actually able to keep those services intact. So I appreciate everybody's input. My goodness, we had more input on that than anything, I think, in my time on the council, which was very, very interesting, which is good. It was good. We knew where a lot of people stood. So Kaylee, go ahead and finish your answer.
Yeah. So to Maddie's question, if we're going to backfill or if positions will remain vacant, we will ask for permission to fill those as they become available. And those are reviewed at the city manager level. And so that's that process. Our hope is that we don't have to have vacancies that go unfilled for extended periods of time. But if we do, we have a plan B. We know what we're going to do in those instances. We do have a number of people who are retiring over the next probably 16, 18 months. And so, I mean, that's coming. That is going to be a discussion that we'll be having. So hopefully we will minimize the impact to the public on that. It's going to be helpful that some of that's going to happen over the winter months. So we pray for a hard freeze and that grass will not grow and that people will not want to get out in the cold and illegally dump. So that would help us a great deal when those kind of seasonal slowdowns happen. It'll give us time to regroup and manage those vacancies.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, thank you, Richard, for that comment. He says it would be ideal to get input prior to lane brain proposal. I appreciate that, but the best way to get honest, quick input is to propose it. and then to see what the citizens really think. It's really tough to get people engaged. And when budget time comes around, by the way, these things were actually proposed online in our town hall meeting that we had on Facebook. But sometimes with all the issues that we have on the table and all the things that were being proposed, sometimes the proposal needs to put out there to see what the citizens think. And you guys did a great job. You let us know, and we had plenty of time to get things turned around to where you guys wanted to see them in the budget. But I would also say, and my dogs, I hope they're not too loud for you. They're having a fun time playing. Hold on just a second. Okay. Hopefully I was able to take care of them. The other thing that we did is we had, I think, 2 or 3 workshops that were public, the public could listen to. We did online as well, as we were discussing what was going to be proposed and working through that process. And so there was a lot of opportunity, even before we started making proposals, to get public input. It's never a perfect process, but I think it worked very well in this case, especially when it came to animal control. So I think we have more. If I can get my technology to work. If you want to know why people talk about backroom deals, that's a very good example. It's difficult and lengthy, but it's done for clap, right? I'm not sure if I understand that fully. Definitely no backroom deals happening with clap or with animal control. We're just simply trying to balance the budget. I agree. Thanks for politely disagreeing, Richard. I appreciate that. Anybody else? It looks like we have a couple online. Matt Foley, bicycles. Bicycle Recycle is still helping some of Wichita's poorest children, having a global impact even with COVID. Yesterday's stats on Facebook, 62,350 posts reached this week. It looks like somebody, Matt, thank you, Matt, for promoting your bicycle recycle program. You guys can go look at that on Facebook if you'd like to. Janet Theoharis, manager, took 2 weeks vacation during budget process and he wasn't there to answer questions. Was that a wise decision? Well, I can't answer right now whether or not that was necessarily a wise decision, but I will tell you that we had staff members available and no question went unanswered for people. And so he was definitely our assistant city manager. Dante Martin is an amazing guy and did a great job fielding questions from people, and amazing staff members that helped us get questions answered as well. Matt Foley mowed a slummy rental property yesterday, to lessen the load on inspectors and improve area visual impact. Sometimes you have to take the bull by the horns. Yes, Matt. Thank you. We appreciate it. That's sometimes when you're able to do that as a person and help your neighbor, that's the best thing you can do. So we appreciate that, Matt, very much. You've always been a great asset to the community you live in. So thank you. Any other questions?
I think we might want to put a disclaimer out there to get permission before mowing.
Absolutely.
So we aren't trespassing. We don't want to promote trespassing.
That's true. No. You're exactly correct. If you're going to mow someone's lawn, please get permission. Ask them first. Unless you know them very well, it's going to be a great surprise. You know they're not going to press charges. Good disclaimer.
Technicalities, just little ones.
Yeah,
Technicalities.
just little technicalities. Well, guys, it's about 10:18, so we're gonna go ahead and leave it there. Please continue to ask your questions online. We will get to them as they come in between now and Monday. Thank you so much for participating in the breakfast this morning. I had a little bit of bacon and coffee. I hope everybody had some fruit or pastries with their coffee this morning as we did this breakfast. Appreciate everybody being here. It's been great to interact with everybody, and continue to call Maddie or I if you have any issues. Maddie's number is 303-8030. Yeah.
I'm working remotely though, so I have to call into my voicemail to check them. The best way to get a hold of me now is by email at mcampbell@wichita.gov.
Yeah, very good. Maddie does an amazing job, and she's taken on some extra responsibilities and is handling things very well. So Maddie, thank you so much for serving our community. You do an amazing job.
If
Thank you.
there are follow-up questions that you receive online, if they're through the weekend, if you'll send those to me, I'm happy to answer those on Monday. Sometimes after people have a chance to think about things, they think of additional questions. Always available to do that, no problem at all. And I did want to give just a quick shout out to Richard Ruth. He saved us the other day. We were in need of a piece of equipment on short notice because we had some items that were blocking a road, and Suzanne made a quick call. He's one of our most active volunteers. And like I said, he swooped right in and saved the day. So haven't had a chance to say thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. I didn't know that. Thank you, Richard, very much for all your help. And again, if you're in the community and you have the means, I would love to say the city could be the end all be all to everybody, but really the citizens that make up the city are what make it go. And when we can help one another, that's the best situation. It really is. Everybody taking responsibility for the city they live in. And so, Richard, thank you so much for your help in that situation. That's amazing to hear. Thank you. All right, everybody, we are going to sign off now. Thank you so much for being at our District 3 breakfast. Hopefully we'll see you out there. Be safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, James. Bye, Maddie.